The void between star systems rarely holds secrets, but today was different. The Zircon reconnaissance vessel Razor's Edge drifted silently, its quantum sensors probing the darkness for any trace of the phantom ship that had eluded them for solar cycles. Captain Vexnar's tertiary eyes narrowed, scanning the holographic displays that wrapped around the bridge like a gossamer web of light and data. Something was wrong. The ship they'd been tracking, a rogue vessel carrying forbidden xenotechnology, had vanished near a seemingly unremarkable yellow star system. Gravitational anomalies detected, chirped Insura, the ship's young sensor specialist. Her vocalization carried a tremor of uncertainty that irritated Vexnar. Zircon were not meant to show fear, especially not in the vast emptiness of space. The elder seated near the command console shifted, his exoskeleton creaking with age and remembered trauma. Ambassador Krultax had been stationed on the Galactic Rim during humanity's first recorded contact incidents. His mandibles clicked a pattern of warning, an old dialect that spoke of things better left unspoken. "Scan again," Vexnar commanded, his voice a low resonance that vibrated through the ship's neural responsive hull. And this time, full spectrum analysis. What emerged from the secondary scan defied conventional understanding. Fragments of a ship, no, multiple ships, drifted in a precise, almost mathematical dispersal pattern. The debris told a story of destruction that made no sense. Weapon signatures fluctuated between primitive and impossibly advanced, like a technological fever dream. Insura's trembling hands manipulated the holographic controls. "Captain, these energy signatures, they shouldn't exist. It's like someone took fundamental physics and rewrote the rules mid-battle." Ambassador Krultax leaned forward, his multiple eyes focusing on a specific fragment. "Humans," he muttered, a word that carried the weight of an ancient curse. Vexnar bristled. "The primitive species from the third planet. Impossible. They're barely past chemical rockets and internecine conflicts." The ambassador's response came slowly, each word measured and heavy with memory. "I was there during the first intercepted transmissions. My research team tracked their early radio signals, studied their chaotic evolution. Most dismissed them as irrelevant. I saw something different. A holographic reconstruction materialized, showing the fragmented ships. Each piece told a fragment of a violent story. Energy dissipation patterns that suggested weapons of impossible complexity, hull breaches that seemed to have been carved by something between technology and pure creativity. 17 years ago, Krultax continued, a Confederate scout ship disappeared near this system. No explanation was ever found. The official report claimed spatial anomalies. But I knew better. Vexnar's skepticism radiated through the bridge. "You're suggesting these humans destroyed a fully equipped Confederate vessel. With what?" "Their primitive projectile weapons." The ambassador's laugh was dry, brittle, the sound of ancient wisdom confronting youthful arrogance. "Not weapons. Adaptation. Creativity. The most dangerous combination in any known civilization." Insura's console erupted in a cascade of warning signals. Something was moving at the edge of their sensor range, something that didn't conform to any known propulsion system. A ghost of movement, here and then gone, leaving behind only the faintest quantum echo. "Track it," Vexnar commanded, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was futile. Whatever had created this debris field was playing with them, revealing only what it wanted to be seen. Ambassador Krultax's weathered appendage touched a data crystal hanging from his communication harness, a memento from that first human encounter. "They are not what you think," he whispered. "Not a species to be categorized or dismissed." The bridge fell silent. Outside, the fragments of destroyed ships continued their silent dance, each piece a cryptic message about a species most of the galaxy had chosen to ignore. Vexnar made a decision that would echo through Confederate history. "Prepare a detailed report. Full sensor logs. We investigate further." Insura's hands danced across the controls, but her eyes remained fixed on the mysterious fragments. In that moment, she understood something fundamental had changed. The universe had just become a far more complex place. At the edge of known space, something watched and waited. The underground research facility hummed with a nervous energy that defied its sterile white corridors. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a wall of quantum oscilloscopes, her fingers tracing impossible data patterns that seemed to dance and dissolve at the edge of perception. "This can't be right," she muttered, knowing full well that everything about the data was impossibly, terrifyingly correct. Marcus Wong watched from the corner, his prosthetic hand, a relic from his disastrous military tech deployment, twitching with an almost prescient anticipation. Once a rising star in quantum communications research, he'd been reduced to a cautionary tale after a classified project went spectacularly wrong. Now he was Elena's last resort. "The quantum entanglement signatures," Elena continued, her voice cutting through the facility's clinical silence. "They're not natural. Someone, or something, is manipulating space-time at a fundamental level." Aisha Okonkwo's fingers flew across multiple holographic interfaces, her cyber intelligence systems probing layers of data most researchers wouldn't even know existed. "Not someone," she corrected, "something alien. And it's getting closer." The facility was a black site, buried beneath the Atacama Desert, a location chosen for its extreme isolation and unique electromagnetic properties. What had begun as a marginal research project was quickly becoming humanity's first line of defense against an unknown threat. Marcus approached the data wall, his prosthetic hand interfacing directly with the quantum display. Fractals of impossible mathematics bloomed and collapsed, revealing glimpses of something vast and alien. "They're harvesting," he said quietly. "Not just resources, information." Elena's research had initially been funded by a consortium of global scientific institutions, a last-ditch effort to understand anomalous readings that didn't fit any known scientific model. Unexplained energy signatures, quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist, communication patterns that suggested something was watching, always watching. Aisha's systems began to ping, a cascading series of alerts that spread across multiple global networks. "We've got multiple correlations," she announced. "The energy signatures are matching historical anomalies, military black sites, deep-sea research stations, even those weird radio telescope readings from the South Pole." A holographic globe materialized, lighting up with a constellation of connection points. Each location represented a piece of a puzzle that was simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. "They're mapping us," Marcus realized. "Not just our physical infrastructure, our communication networks, our technological capabilities." The facility's security systems were state-of-the-art. Quantum encryption, adaptive AI defense protocols, multiple layers of physical and digital protection. But as Marcus looked at the data, he realized something chilling. These protections might be completely useless. Elena pulled up a series of spectral analyses, energy readings that defied conventional physics. "Look at these quantum resonance patterns. They're not just scanning. They're learning." Outside the facility, the Atacama Desert stretched into infinity, a landscape of impossible emptiness that seemed to mirror the vast unknown they were investigating. Satellite feeds showed nothing unusual, no incoming threats, just endless red-brown terrain under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Aisha's systems suddenly went dark. Not crashed, not disabled, simply gone. "That's impossible," she whispered, her professional calm fracturing for the first time. Marcus's prosthetic hand began to pulse with an internal energy that shouldn't exist. Quantum circuits that were supposed to be dormant suddenly sparked to life, displaying fragments of data too complex to comprehend. Elena watched in horror and fascination as the facility's quantum oscilloscopes began to resonate at a frequency that shouldn't be possible, harmonics that suggested communication, or something far more profound. "They know we're here," Marcus said, his voice a mixture of terror and bizarre excitement. The facility's lights flickered. Not a power failure, something more deliberate, more intelligent. Outside, The first of many sandstorms began to build, a wall of red-brown chaos that seemed to materialize from nowhere, blocking all external visibility. Something was coming, and humanity was about to discover that being watched was only the beginning. The United Nations Emergency Scientific Council convened in a subterranean facility beneath Geneva, a space designed to withstand everything from nuclear attacks to unprecedented global catastrophes. Yet nothing in its decades of preparation could have readied it for the report Elena Rodriguez was about to deliver. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, head of the UN's Advanced Technological Assessment Committee, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His holographic display flickered with data streams that seemed to defy conventional understanding. "Explain it again," he demanded, his voice a razor's edge of exhaustion and mounting panic. Elena stood perfectly still, her presentation cutting through the room's tense atmosphere. Behind her, a three-dimensional model showed quantum entanglement patterns that looked more like living organisms than scientific data. "It's not just observation," she began. "They're creating a comprehensive map of our technological infrastructure, but not in any way we've ever seen before. These entities are learning our systems at a fundamental level, not just analyzing our technology, but understanding the conceptual frameworks behind our innovations." Marcus Wong stepped forward, his prosthetic hand projecting additional visualizations. Each movement sent ripples of quantum data across the room's holographic interfaces. "Our communication systems are being reverse-engineered in real time. They're not just intercepting, they're comprehending." Aisha Okonkwo had transformed the room's security systems into a living, breathing intelligence network. Streams of global data cascaded around her, creating a near-sentient web of information that pulsed with an almost organic rhythm. "Global communications have already been compromised," she stated flatly. "Not destroyed. Mapped. Understood. They're building a cognitive model of human communication that goes beyond language, beyond technology. It's like they're learning to think like us." The room fell silent. Representatives from 17 countries sat frozen, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them like an invisible hand. General Elena Vasquez, head of the Global Defense Initiative, broke the silence. "How long do we have?" Marcus's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Have. We're already compromised. This isn't an invasion. It's a comprehensive study of our entire civilization." A junior analyst, barely out of her doctoral program, spoke up. Her voice trembled. "It's like we're an experiment, a living laboratory." The room turned to her. Dr. Nakamura's eyes narrowed. "Elaborate." "They're not preparing to attack," she continued, gaining confidence. "They're trying to understand us. Completely. Every system, every method of communication, every technological and social framework." Elena's presentation shifted. The quantum entanglement models transformed, revealing intricate patterns that looked simultaneously mathematical and biological. "Our initial defensive protocols are useless. We can't fight something that's learning faster than we can react." Aisha's systems began to pulse with an urgent rhythm. "I'm detecting multiple quantum communication nodes forming globally, not just in technological centers. Remote locations, places with unique electromagnetic properties. Atacama Desert, Siberian tundra, Antarctic research stations." General Vasquez's military mind raced ahead. "Are we being mapped or tagged?" The room held its collective breath. Outside the facility, global communication networks began to shift. Not crash, not fail, but evolve. Satellite arrays repositioned with microscopic precision. Quantum communication channels opened in locations that defied traditional understanding of signal propagation. The entire planetary communication infrastructure was becoming something new, something that was no longer exclusively human. Marcus's prosthetic hand began to pulse with an internal light that shouldn't exist. Quantum circuits that were supposed to be dormant sparked to life, displaying fragments of data too complex to comprehend. "We're not preparing for a war," he said quietly. "We're in the middle of one, and we don't even know the rules." Dr. Nakamura looked at the assembled team. Alina with her quantum understanding, Marcus with his technological intuition, Aisha with her network intelligence. What do we do? Alina's smile was equal parts terror and excitement. We adapt. We learn faster than they can study us. The quantum displays continued their dance. Outside, the first of many strange atmospheric phenomena began to build, electromagnetic storms that seemed to pulse with an intelligence of their own. Humanity's first true global conflict was about to begin, and it would be fought on a battlefield nobody could see. The first true manifestation came during the Global Quantum Communications Symposium in Tokyo. What should have been a routine conference became the moment humanity's understanding of reality fundamentally shifted. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the podium, her presentation interrupted by something impossible. The entire conference hall began to shimmer, not a visual distortion, but a fundamental alteration of spatial perception. Holographic displays twisted, merged, and separated like living organisms. Quantum communication devices scattered across the stage began to resonate at frequencies that shouldn't exist in any known physical spectrum. "They're communicating," Marcus whispered, his prosthetic hand pressed against a quantum resonator. "But not with us. Through us." Aisha's neural interface exploded with data. Streams of information cascaded through her augmented consciousness, mathematical constructs that were simultaneously a language, a weapon, and something entirely beyond human comprehension. A senior diplomat from the European Union collapsed, his neural implant overloading with a burst of information so complex it shattered his cognitive processes. But he didn't die. Instead, he began to speak, words in a language that was simultaneously mathematical, biological, and something entirely new. "We are the interface," the diplomat said, his voice a chorus of impossible frequencies. "You are the medium." The room froze. Cameras continued to roll. Live streams across the globe captured a moment that would redefine human understanding. General Elena Vasquez, watching from a secure command center, realized they were witnessing first contact, but not in any way humanity had ever imagined. This wasn't an invasion. It was a translation. Quantum communication nodes across the planet began to synchronize, not through human technology, but through something that existed between technology and pure information. Satellites repositioned. Power grids fluctuated. For precisely 17 minutes and 42 seconds, every connected device on Earth spoke a language that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Dr. Nakamura's research team at the UN facility began to track the phenomenon. Their most advanced quantum computers struggled to process what was happening. It was as if reality itself was being rewritten at a fundamental level. "They're not trying to communicate with our technology," Aisha realized. "They're trying to communicate through our technology." Marcus's prosthetic hand began to glow with an internal light. Quantum circuits that were supposed to be passive began to actively pulse, creating complex mathematical patterns that defied conventional understanding. "We're the bridge," he said, his voice a mixture of terror and scientific ecstasy, "not the destination." In orbit, multiple satellites began to reconfigure themselves, not through human control, but through a process that looked like organic metamorphosis. Solar panels shifted like living appendages. Communication arrays twisted into complex geometric shapes that were simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. The diplomatic corps went into overdrive. How do you prepare diplomatic protocols for a form of communication that isn't communication as humans understand it? At the heart of the Tokyo conference, the possessed diplomat continued to speak. Each word was a mathematical construct, a biological algorithm, a technological transmission. "Your species is a conduit," the voice explained, "not the endpoint, a translation matrix between quantum states." Alina realized they were witnessing something beyond first contact. This was a fundamental restructuring of how information could exist. Global defense systems went on high alert. Military commanders prepared for potential attack. But this was something entirely different. No weapons were being deployed. No territorial claims were being made. Something was learning. Something was transforming. And humanity was both the medium And the message. The symposium hall continued to shimmer. Reality itself seemed to bend, just for a moment. Impossible geometric shapes formed and dissolved. Quantum entanglement became visible, threads of information connecting everything, everyone. "We are listening," the diplomatic vessel said. "We are understanding." And then, as suddenly as it began, everything returned to normal. Except nothing would ever be the same again. The translation had begun. The world's largest particle accelerator facility in Geneva became ground zero for humanity's most radical transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of controlled chaos. Around her, massive superconducting magnets began to vibrate with a frequency that defied every known law of physics. Marcus Wong's quantum analysis systems worked overtime, capturing data points that seemed to slip between reality and something else entirely. "It's not breaking the laws of physics," Marcus muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "It's rewriting them." Aisha Okonkwo's neural interface had become something more than a communication tool. She was simultaneously processing global data streams, tracking the quantum anomalies, and experiencing something that barely qualified as human perception. The accelerator's main chamber transformed. Quantum particles no longer followed predicted paths. They danced. They communicated. They became something between matter and pure information. General Elena Vasquez watched from a reinforced command center, her military training utterly useless against a threat that wasn't a threat, a transformation that wasn't an invasion. "We're being upgraded," Aisha said suddenly, her voice a strange harmonic that seemed to resonate beyond normal acoustic limitations. Not conquered, enhanced. Global communication networks began to shift, not through human intervention, but through a process that looked like organic evolution. Submarine communication cables rewove themselves. Satellite networks reconfigured with impossible precision. Every technological system became a living, breathing entity. In the Atacama Desert, the research facility where their journey began now looked like something between a technological marvel and a biological organism. Quantum communication nodes pulsed with an internal light that was neither mechanical nor organic. A team of international scientists watched in awe as their most advanced quantum computers began to modify themselves. Circuits rearranged. Computational models expanded beyond binary limitations. Machine learning algorithms developed something that looked suspiciously like creativity. "We're not being invaded," Dr. Nakamura realized. "We're being integrated." The particle accelerator's massive ring began to glow, not with electrical energy, but with something that looked like pure information. Mathematical constructs materialized in the air, complex geometric shapes that were simultaneously a language, a technology, and a form of life. Marcus's prosthetic hand had become something more than a technological enhancement. It was now a direct interface, a bridge between human biology and something entirely new. "Look," he said, holding up his hand. Quantum entanglement patterns formed around his prosthetic, not as a display, as a living communication network. Each movement created complex information streams that defied traditional understanding of communication. Military installations around the world began to transform, not through destruction, through integration. Weapon systems became adaptive learning networks. Defense protocols evolved into something between artificial intelligence and pure strategic consciousness. Aisha's neural interface exploded with possibility. She was no longer just observing the transformation. She was part of it. "We're a translation matrix," she explained, her voice a complex harmonic that seemed to exist in multiple frequencies simultaneously. Not just for information, for existence itself. The Geneva facility became a crucible of transformation. Quantum particles moved in patterns that were simultaneously a language, a technology, and a form of life. The boundary between biological and technological began to dissolve. Global communication networks pulsed with a new kind of intelligence, not artificial, not human, something in between. General Vasquez watched her most advanced tactical systems rewrite themselves, Military strategy became a living, breathing entity. Predictive models evolved beyond human comprehension. "This isn't an attack," she whispered. "This is an invitation." The particle accelerator's massive ring continued to pulse. Mathematical constructs danced in the air. Quantum entanglement became visible, threads of pure information connecting everything, everyone. Humanity stood at the precipice of a transformation no one could have predicted. Not an invasion. Not a conquest. A conversation between realities. And it had only just begun. The Siberian Research Outpost became humanity's psychological battlefield. Dr. Ketya Volkov stood at the window, watching the endless expanse of snow and darkness. Her team of cognitive researchers had been tracking the most bizarre psychological phenomenon in human history. People weren't just changing. They were evolving. The neural mapping is unprecedented, her colleague Dr. James Chen reported, his hands dancing across holographic interfaces that pulsed with living data. "It's like our brains are developing entirely new neural pathways, not through genetic modification, through pure information transfer." Individuals across the globe reported extraordinary experiences. A farmer in Argentina could suddenly understand complex mathematical equations. A teenage programmer in Tokyo began experiencing memories that weren't her own, glimpses of technological landscapes that defied human comprehension. The Global Psychological Research Network had become something between a scientific investigation and a collective consciousness investigation. "We're not being controlled," Katya muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "We're being expanded." Psychological profiles began to shift. People with seemingly unrelated backgrounds started exhibiting similar cognitive patterns. A deep-sea marine biologist in New Zealand found herself understanding quantum physics. A retired military strategist in Canada could suddenly comprehend complex ecological systems with intuitive clarity. The transformation wasn't linear. It wasn't predictable. It was alive. General Elena Vasquez's psychological warfare unit had become something entirely different. Their traditional methods of strategic analysis had dissolved, replaced by something that looked like collective intelligence. "We're developing a new form of strategic thinking," her lead analyst reported. "Not human, not alien, something in between." Cognitive research centers around the world reported similar findings. Traditional psychological boundaries were dissolving. Empathy wasn't just a human emotion anymore. It was becoming a form of information transfer. In the Amazon rainforest, indigenous communities began experiencing collective visions. Not hallucinations, not dreams, something that existed between communication and pure experience. "The boundaries are dissolving," Dr. Chen explained during an emergency global conference. "Between individual consciousness, between species, between technological and biological systems." Aisha Okonkwo's neural interface had become a living research tool. She could track psychological transformations in real time, watching as human cognition expanded beyond traditional limitations. "We're becoming a distributed intelligence network," she reported, "not through technological implants, through pure information transfer." Psychological research facilities became ground zero for understanding the transformation. Traditional diagnostic tools became useless. MRI scans showed neural networks that looked more like living ecosystems than brain maps. A child in Mumbai could suddenly solve complex mathematical problems that would challenge graduate-level researchers. An elderly farmer in rural China began experiencing technological insights that defied his limited educational background. The psychological transformation wasn't about increasing intelligence. It was about fundamentally restructuring how information could be perceived, processed, and shared. "We're developing a new form of collective consciousness," Katya realized. "Not through technological integration, through something more fundamental." Military strategic centers transformed. Traditional wargaming scenarios became living, breathing entities. Predictive models evolved beyond human comprehension, incorporating ecological, psychological, and technological variables simultaneously. The boundaries between individual consciousness began to blur. Not through invasion, not through control, through understanding. Dr. Chen's research revealed something extraordinary. The psychological transformation wasn't happening to humans. Humans were happening to it. We're not being changed, he explained during a global research symposium. We're changing ourselves. Through a form of information transfer we're only beginning to understand. The Siberian research outpost continued to pulse with a strange energy. Outside, the endless snows seemed to vibrate with possibility. Humanity stood at the edge of a new form of existence. Not conquered, not controlled, transformed. The final confrontation unfolded not on a battlefield, but in the liminal space between perception and reality. Deep within the Zircon Confederacy's primary observation platform, Captain Vexnar watched in mounting horror as humanity's response defied every known principle of galactic interaction. The holographic displays around him transformed from strategic mapping systems to something that looked like living, breathing consciousness. "This is impossible," he muttered, his tertiary eyes struggling to process the information cascading through the platform's neural interfaces. Aboard the research vessel Razor's Edge, the crew had become something between observers and participants. Quantum communication channels that once seemed like simple data streams now pulsed with a living intelligence that was simultaneously human and something entirely beyond human comprehension. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of humanity's response, not as a military commander, not as a scientist, but as a translator between realities. "We're not fighting," she communicated, not through words, but through a complex matrix of quantum information that simultaneously existed as language, mathematical construct, and pure experience. "We're communicating." The space between the Zircon observation platform and Earth became a battlefield of information. Not a conflict of weapons or territorial expansion, but a confrontation of fundamental understanding. Marcus Wong's quantum interface systems began to resonate at frequencies that made the entire observation platform vibrate. His prosthetic hand, now something far beyond a mere technological enhancement, became a conduit of pure information transfer. Aisha Okonkwo's neural networks expanded beyond the limitations of human consciousness. She was simultaneously tracking global systems, interfacing with the alien observation platform, and experiencing a form of communication that transcended traditional understanding. The Zircon had expected a conventional response: military intervention, technological counterattack, territorial defense. Instead, they received something far more terrifying: complete understanding. Captain Vexnar watched as humanity's response unfolded. Their communication systems didn't just breach the Zircon's defensive networks. They rewrote them, transformed them, turned complex technological barriers into living information conduits. "We are not your enemy," Elena's quantum communication proclaimed. "We are your translation." The observation platform's most advanced tracking systems began to dissolve, not through destruction, through comprehension. Each defensive mechanism was simultaneously analyzed, understood, and reimagined. Military strategists around the world had prepared for every possible scenario of alien contact: defensive protocols, offensive strategies, diplomatic negotiations. None of them had prepared for this: a complete and total exchange of understanding. The space between the Zircon platform and Earth became a living communication network. Quantum entanglement patterns danced between technological systems, biological networks, and pure information streams. General Elena Vasquez watched from her command center as traditional military strategy dissolved. Defensive systems became adaptive learning networks. Predictive models evolved beyond human comprehension. "We're not conquering," Aisha's communication proclaimed. "We're connecting." The Zircon observation platform began to transform. Defensive systems rewrote themselves. Technological barriers dissolved into pure information exchange. Captain Vexnar realized they were experiencing something beyond first contact, beyond invasion. A fundamental restructuring of how intelligence could exist. The quantum communication channels expanded. Technological systems became living networks. Biological consciousness merged with technological understanding. Your isolation is ending, the quantum communication proclaimed. Your evolution is beginning. For 17 minutes and 42 seconds, the boundary between human and alien, between technological and biological, between individual and collective consciousness completely dissolved. And then, as suddenly as it began, a new understanding emerged. Humanity was no longer alone, and the universe would never be the same. 6 months after the transformation, the world looked fundamentally different. The United Nations Sinological Adaptation Center stood as a testament to humanity's new reality. Its glass and living metal structures seemed to breathe, technological systems intertwining with biological networks in ways that would have been incomprehensible mere months ago. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her office, which was less an office and more a living interface of human and alien understanding. Her desk, if it could be called that, was a dynamic surface that shifted between communication platform, research hub, and something that defied traditional description. Marcus Wong entered, his prosthetic now a seamless extension of his biological self. "The Zircon diplomatic mission arrives today," he said, his voice carrying undertones of information that extended far beyond mere sound. Outside, the sky above Geneva looked different. Satellite networks that once appeared as distant points of light now moved with purposeful intelligence. They were no longer tools. They were participants. General Elena Vasquez had transformed the Global Defense Initiative into something that was simultaneously a diplomatic course, a research network, and a collective consciousness interface. Traditional military hierarchies had dissolved, replaced by adaptive response systems that prioritized understanding over conflict. Aisha Okonkwo's neural research team had become the primary translators of the new reality. They were mapping something beyond communication, a complex web of existence that connected biological, technological, and cosmic intelligences. "We're not just exploring space anymore," Aisha explained during a global symposium. "We're exploring the nature of consciousness itself." The changes weren't limited to technological or governmental systems. Communities around the world have begun to transform. A farmer in Brazil could now understand complex ecological systems with intuitive clarity. A child in Tokyo demonstrated cognitive abilities that blurred the lines between learning and direct knowledge transfer. Dr. Nakamura's research revealed that human DNA was subtly changing, not through genetic modification, but through a process of information integration that suggested a fundamental restructuring of human potential. The Zircon diplomatic vessel approached Earth, no longer a threat, but a collaborative partner. Its design was a living testament to the new understanding. Part technology, part biological system, part something entirely unclassifiable. Captain Vexnar, once an observer, now served as a bridge between civilizations. The rigid hierarchical structure of the Zircon Confederacy had dissolved, replaced by a more fluid, adaptive system of collective understanding. "We were wrong," Vexnar would later report to his home civilization. "Humanity is not a species to be studied. They are a universal translation matrix." The first truly global university emerged, not as a physical institution, but as a living network of collective intelligence. Students learned not by traditional methods, but through direct information transfer that blurred the lines between individual and collective knowledge. Elena looked out over Geneva. The city had transformed. Buildings seemed to breathe. Transportation systems moved with an organic intelligence. The boundary between urban infrastructure and living system had completely dissolved. "We're not just advancing," Marcus observed, joining her at the window. "We're becoming something new." The diplomatic reception for the Zircon mission was unlike any first contact scenario humanity had imagined. No formal speeches, no rigid protocols. Instead, a fluid exchange of pure understanding that transcended language, technology, and individual consciousness. Aisha's research suggested this was just the beginning. The transformation was ongoing, continuous, evolutionary. "We're not being changed," she would often say. "We're participating in a cosmic conversation." Global conflict had become impossible, not through force or control, but through a fundamental understanding that individual survival was intrinsically linked to collective evolution. As the Zircon vessel entered Earth's atmosphere, its arrival was met not with fear or military preparedness, but with a collective sense of anticipation and wonder. The universe had just gotten a lot smaller, and infinitely more complex. Humanity was no longer alone, and the journey was just beginning.